Bang! Neeves Knives, I'm Jared, and here we have the Sniper Blade Works LPC. This knife is made in Taiwan, and it is an absolute beast. You can tell this knife is made for tactical-ish reasons or use. Now, I do have one significant issue that we're going to talk about when we get to the negatives, but let's jump right into it. So we have a very robust S35 VN blade, which S35 is a nice tough steel. It's nice and stainless, and it holds a really good edge. In my opinion, 600 grit is the best edge finish you can put on S35 VN. Now, the blade is thick and robust. Look at how thick that boy is. It has a straight clip point blade, so it's going to be very acute and pokey, but you're not going to have to worry about breaking or chipping that tip. So as far as poking reasons go, it's going to be really, really good at that, and you can actually use it for utility cuts because it is acute enough for that. So you can use it to open things up, use it for utility purposes, whatever. But it's not going to be fragile. Now, as far as the edge goes, 37 thousandths behind the edge, right around there. It is very robust. This is not going to be your everyday slicer, but it's a knife that you could be a little bit tougher on. You're not going to have to worry about chipping or anything like that. It should be fairly robust, you know, considering how thick the edge is. Now, and it'll still cut. So, you know, if you still need to cut something, it'll be just fine, but you could probably be a little bit tougher on the edge than you might be with something that's a little bit thinner. Now, the handle is like a pistol grip. And it feels like that. When you get your hands around it, it feels like you just want to jam it into something. That's exactly how it feels. It feels like it wants to be stabbed or poked into something. And, you know, it just has that pistol grip feel where the blade leans nice and forward and straight out of your hand, basically aiming at whatever you punch at. I think that's pretty cool. But you can choke up because it has the choil right behind the edge if you did need to bear down and cut something and you needed a little bit more leverage. You can also hold it back here, but you're in risk of hitting the choil when you're doing repeat cuts. Now, the handle is a titanium Framelock. You can see how many standoffs it has. It has a lot of standoffs. This is a very robust knife. Even the titanium Framelock side is very thick. Then it has a G10 show side. No liner on this side, but it is nice, thick, robust G10, and G10 is actually very strong material. Now, it has a decently sized stop pin, and it has a nice solid lockup. We'll talk more about that here in a second, but you can see nice strong lockup. Now, as far as the clip goes, the clip is a regular spring pocket clip, and it'll slide in and out of the pocket just fine. Let's talk about the action. The action, you can see the thumb stud has these like little spikes on top of it, and then it has like a spiraled grooves going around the sides of it, making it extremely, extremely grippy. Very, very grippy. It grips you back, whether you're going to thumb flick it or thumb roll it. Either way, that thumb stud, it grips you back. It's not painful or anything like that, but it's nice and grippy, so it snaps out with authority. The detent, very appropriate for this type of blade. And when you disengage it, it has a nice chamfer on the lock bar, so it's easy to disengage, and it is fall shut. Complete guillotine action. Now, the detent is a little bit late, but you can get right past it because there's no flipper tab in the way. So very, very smooth on the drop. Now, as far as the groove goes, no, you can't use it, and no, there's no thumb stud on this side. I do wish the thumb stud was double-sided, or I wish I could at least use the hole. Now, you can wedge your finger in there real deep and give it a wrist flick. That will work, as you can see, but you can tell it's not designed for that, even though you can still do it like I am right now. But you can tell it's only designed for the thumb stud opening. Now, let's talk about some negatives really quick. So, let's talk about some small ones, and then I'll talk about my biggest negative. So, one negative, T6s. We have a T10 pivot. I don't know why they didn't just do T10 across the board. This thing is nice and robust. Look at all these standoffs. I would have loved to have seen big hardware as well. Is it that big of a deal? No, but I would rather just use one bit across the board and not have to switch out bits. And T10s are always better. They don't strip out as easy as T6s do. My next negative is, we already spoke about it, no double thumb stud. I wish there was a double thumb stud. You know, that would just make it, you know, a little bit more fidgety. Next thing, sharpening tool and plunge grind. the plunge grind hits the edge. So remember, we're never worried about where the plunge grind starts. We're worried about where it ends. And it starts here and it ends at the place we don't want, which is the edge. I wish this was either brought back and the plunge grind ended way before it hit the edge, or two, drop it straight down so it's not tapering to the edge. However, you can easily throw in your own sharpening notch when it becomes an issue. There's nothing in the way of it, so you can easily cut in your own if it gets to that point and you've sharpened it a lot, because as you sharpen, you're going to sharpen up the blade. And you have a chance, because it's a little thicker here where the plunge grind is, it could start slightly recurving a little bit. And if that happens, just cut in your own sharpening notch. But it should be relatively fine as long as you kind of know what you're doing with sharpening. Now, the most significant issue I have is we do have a little bit of lock rock. Now, while the lockup is nice and strong, it does, if I put some pressure on the spine, you can see some movement from the lock bar. It doesn't fail when I spine whack it, and I've spine whacked it really hard, and it has not failed on me, so I got to give it credit for that. But I do feel the lock rocking a little bit. And the reason why is because it locks up all the way up to a point of which there's a ramp. There's a ramp on top of the lock face that makes it to have stronger lockup. So as the lock bar moves over slowly through time, it moves slowly. And so it's not really fast. Basically, so the lock bar doesn't just move all the way over to 100% lockup. There's a little ramp in the way. But that ramp is right where the steel lock bar insert, that's right where it hits. So since it's on that ramp, applying a little bit of pressure on the spine, you can feel it moving down the ramp. Now, to be honest, with a frame lock, when your hands are wrapped around it, you're making that lock stronger. So while my hands are wrapped around it, it's not budging, not even a little bit. But it still is a thing. Now, will it break in? I've flipped it a lot to see if it was going to break in, because I didn't want to, complain about it when it was something that was just going to go away after, a couple hundred flips. But it's still there, even though it's not slipping. It just has a little bit of rock. So maybe it'll break in, maybe it won't, but I honestly don't have any doubt that they won't take care of it or replace it or do whatever. So I have already left them a comment, and I'm sure that they will take care of it. And to be 100% honest, I could technically probably fix it myself. And how would I do it? I would just sand that little area to give it a little bit of texture right there, just a little tiny bit, and see if that helps it. And if that didn't help it, I would just smooth out that ramp just a little tiny bit so it wasn't so abrupt. So the ramp wasn't so big, make it a slight less. And I'm sure that would work just fine. But like I said, I'm sure they would have no problem just replacing it or fixing it or whatever. Anyways, other than those things, the only other negative I could say, and it's not really too much of a negative, but it's thick. It's got a thick edge. It's not going to be a slicer. It's not going to be something you're going to use to break down your cardboard. Could you absolutely use it? Yes, it's still going to cut just fine, especially if you put a low angle edge on this. Heck, you don't even have to put a low angle edge on this because it's so thick. You put a regular edge on it, 20 degrees, it's going to have a nice big bevel. So at that point, it'll slice really good. It's not going to have no problem slicing. It's just not going to be something that you're going to want to use compared to other knives with super thin geometry. However, this knife is going to be a bit tougher, so you're going to be able to poke it into things, maybe smack it into things a little bit harder than you would maybe something with a thinner blade, which all these knives have different purposes, so that's its application, right? Its application is supposed to be a little bit tougher, and I'm okay with that. I like having different kinds of knives. Some knives are made for super slicing, some knives are made for light duty, some knives are made for utility purposes, some knives are made to be a little bit tougher on. So I do like that we have a lot of variety, and this would be considered, in my opinion, a self-defense / tactical knife that you could use for some EDC purposes. Anyways, there you guys go. Until next time, peace.